Good afternoon, good morning in some cases, and welcome to our webinar today. I'm delighted that you've joined us. We will likely have several that join us in progress. We've got well over 100 that have signed up for this session today, so that's wonderful. I know some of you will be watching this as we send out the video, and thank you for watching it. And thank you for those that have attended live today, are attending live today. I know it's a step out of your busy day, and I certainly appreciate that. We're going to try and contain this to about half an hour, 40 minutes with questions at the end. And I welcome any questions. You've got a Q&A capability. Throw anything you want into that Q&A, and we'll have our guests and our faculty answer as we're going through this. So again, welcome, and again, really appreciate you being here. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we're on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the effect of residential schools and colonialism on Indigenous families and communities, and to consider how we are and can each, in our own way, try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. I'm delighted to talk about the Certificate in Professional Impact Analysis, a wonderful program we've got as part of the business school with input from our faculty, both in the business school as well as, of course, in the economics department at Queen's. And today's special topic, number 6 in our series, is the transformational impact of free transit for youth. And I'm just delighted that we've got this on for today. So this program is the only program that measures good. And that's the simplification of this is to try and distill it down to that. But this idea, and you can think of your own sense of what is good or what is impact within the world in which you work and live. And that brings it to life. And hopefully this example will also do that. The reason we do that is to enable leaders like yourself, and why we've created this program is to measure good so you can do more good. And simple as that, and a very focused approach to that. It's important to measure impact, this idea of good, not only because you're getting a lot more questions from influencers and from perspective holders when it comes to that, shareholders, community, influencers, government, customers, whoever it may be, but there's this demand to really align it with the way that you would measure financial impact or customer satisfaction impact in terms of being able to report on what you're doing. And that becomes increasingly important as we think about putting light and information around impact. So this program is designed for busy execs like yourself. The program is a 6-month program. We're just at the tail end of our second cohort through this year. We've got a new program starting in January, 6 months, 3 modules, recorded lectures you can watch and rewatch. There's a live capstone at the end of each of the modules, and of course, a final certification exam as you become a professional impact analyst. So today we want to talk about the application of measuring impact, and that's why we put these sessions together. The faculty that we've got as part of this program include Dr. Bauman Kashi, Dr. Chris Cotton, and from the business school, Dr. Elspeth Murray. And the 3 of them have collaborated on this focused program to measure impact, measure good. The more you can measure, the more you can do. And that's the thrust of this. Today, I'm delighted to have Dr. Bauman Kashi with us today, and I'll turn it over to him as he introduces both our seminar topic as well as our special guest that's part of the program today. So Dr. Kashi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Glenn. Just confirming you can hear me. Excellent, thank you. So I'll do a quick introduction to Dan. This is a pleasure to have him speak. I've had the pleasure of having Dan actually present before for some of the courses that we've done, including CPIA. So Dan is a social innovator, facilitator, mentor, and communicator. Those are probably the best 4 words to describe him. really dedicated his life to making the city of Kingston a sustainable, smart, livable sort of city, and inspiring young people to develop the skills needed to live sustainably in this sort of changing world that we live in. Dan's leadership has been instrumental in several award-winning initiatives, including the internationally recognized Kingston High School Bus Pass program, which is we'll hear a lot about it today. And in addition to local work, Dan serves as the Ontario Association of School Business Officials, OASBO, Environmental Sustainability Committee, where he helps develop landmark. He helped develop a landmark report highlighting the environmental and social impacts of youth transit programs. Um, he also leads a national movement called Get on the Bus. There's a very interesting website. I encourage you to take a look. A program of the Canadian charity, a Small Change Fund. Through this work, he supports communities across Canada by advancing transit policy, training, and engagement, spreading knowledge and best practices that empower youth and municipalities alike to build more sustainable, inclusive transportation systems. So we'll hear quite a bit about this from Dan today. But before I turn it to Dan, we use the term impact analysis quite a bit. It's the core of the name of the program that we run at Queen's, the CPIA program, and it's also the name of this webinar series, which is the impact analysis webinar. And oftentimes there's a question around like, what does this mean? Because there's so many terms floating around when you look at the industry, and impact analysis is just another term there. Where we chose this with a lot of like intention and purpose. We wanted to really take a very general view at things. We are living in a world today where there are many actors in society that are concerned with impact. You have public institutions, you have the government, which is mandated with improving the society's well-being. They want to impact the lives of people in their country. We have NGOs, whether domestic or international, that are trying to like fill any gaps left by the governments, whether domestic community level projects to international organizations and NGOs that are trying to fix things that each individual government cannot fix on their own. We also have for-profit entities. They're also interested in financial and social impact of what they do. And what they do could be the core business they do, whether it's an organization producing something or doing consulting or whatever they're doing. Or sometimes for-profit entities might enter into charitable activities. They are interested in knowing what is the impact, what are the impacts of these activities. And at the end of this all, we have individuals. We're always concerned with how their decisions or events impact them and those they care about. So everyone is kind of interested in impact and is concerned with impact. However, the approaches out there, what you see out there is always really focused on really isolated. We function in silos where every sector, every actor comes up with different types of analysis, comes up with different names, and really the purpose of this program has been around bringing it all together and say, if you're concerned with impact, it doesn't really matter who we are. If you're concerned with impact, we need to learn how to deal with it, how to analyze it. So really this is the background behind why the term is used, because you want to really bridge these gaps and bring everything together around impact. So this webinar series is also designed to tackle that problem. So we invite diverse group of guests from academia, from government, from NGOs, advocates, private firms, etc., that have one thing in common, that they're all concerned with impact. So I I met Dan a while ago, and I encourage you to watch his TED talk about this topic too. And he's always been passionate about transit policy and the youth. And as part of my job, I always question the viability of any policy or any initiative. I want to know whether or not the benefits exceed the costs. I questioned, and not many people like these questions. What I question is running a bus service even a viable thing? Shouldn't we give everyone just Uber credit in this day and age? So I really questioned these things, and Dan was a person that did not run away from such questions. And eventually, I think it was last year when the Ontario Association of School Board Officials Environmental Sustainability Committee, which Dan plays a big role there, came and said, okay, let's do a study comparing the costs and benefits of investing in youth transit in Kingston. And that's what Dan is here to talk about. This was a very eye-opening study. Before I pass it to Dan, I should acknowledge that this presentation is not in any shape or form an official presentation by the OASBO or the Limestone District School Board or the entities that were involved with this policy. This is just a webinar series of CPIA, and we want to make sure this remains that. So with that, I'll pass it to Dan with a very simple high-level question of uh, where do impact and impact analysis come into your work? And here's that.
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you, Bauman. And thank you, everyone, again, to take time out of your day to see something that means a lot to me. And I'm very happy about just what we're going to be talking about today, and excited to tell you a little bit more. I'm a very visual person. I learned that later of how I kind of probably could have learned better in school. But before I talk about what this has been for me, I want to give you some context. And so this is actually the cover of the report that I'll be talking about quickly, and then really diving in with that context about why it mattered for me and how I see it, I guess, or what we're used it for. So if we really start, Glenn, to the next slide, in the city of Kingston in 2012, there was an opportunity. Politicians and the local school board saw an opportunity to give grade 9s free access to transit. So I had a lot more hair back then. I worked still part-time for the school board, as I still do, and I love this program we do locally. Next slide, Glenn. After this time here, what happened was there was time in which we created a program together. We didn't know what we were doing, right? And so some of the things we'll talk about today is data and impact and setting things up. Well, I'm not from the future, but I am from the past. So if you can learn anything from me today around the structure of social impact and why it's benefited myself and I think more and youth across Canada now is that. But what I want to show you too is what this is. So really two main things. It became a program where high school age youth in the city of Kingston, all schools, public, private, French public, French Catholic, homeschool children, next slide please, had the opportunity to get a free bus pass. All right. And this is going on since 2012. And then the other thing that actually tied to all this was training, was normalizing. So that's me, as you can see there. This is a real tour on a real bus taken for a VIP tour at a public school. This was Bay Ridge several years ago, where we literally just go on a 15, 20-minute field trip, and it's a moving presentation. The how, the why, the how to stop it, the safety, all the questions. If you don't use transit yourself in a smaller community, you would probably have as an adult too. How do we expect a 14-year-old? So continue, please, Glenn. There's a couple more slides and I'm going to dig into the impact. So what you're seeing here, one thing is I've always seen light level stats. Like I can tell you that the first year that this ran with just grade 9s, there were 28,000 rides. And then I could see that as we anchored more on and got all youth on grade 9 through 12, that it became 500 to 600 rides a year. That always got me. That was enough to get Dan like this. But really what came from this analysis was even more. Next slide, please. So at the time, this was several years ago, even there was a master's thesis done on it by Veronica Sullivan, a young woman at a University of Waterloo. So I could say things like, I know that grade 12 students use it on average 3 times more than grade 9s. And I know that it is looking like a really good intervention for youth in school. But at the end of the day, next slide, please. I didn't know the impact. And so we're going to be talking now more about that. And I know Bauman has some questions for me. But imagine, maybe I lived to 80 statistically as a male. And I spent 12 years doing this and believing in it. And I thought it worked. But as Bauman said, I had to know it worked before I had to, right? For 2 reasons. One, it's not about me. It's about this is good policy. This is a good use of resources, money, a good intervention. We know this now. So this is something that using impact analysis for me can scale. It shows a good use of dollars, but not just money, value. So what you're going to see here from 2012 to 19 is the data set that we used before COVID, mostly when it matured and it operated before COVID in 7 straight years there. Every year, 196,000 more rides by youth, high school age. That's 72,000 fewer car trips. Any parents out there want your time back? I have a 17-year-old. 10,000 hours of parents' time. I love looking at the different ways that we can layer policy for different outcomes. 70 tons of carbon emissions, 16,000 fewer absences for youth, and 83,000 more cultural trips. So that's things like, that could be getting to their first job, volunteering, friends, whatever it is. And I think we're going to get right into it now. And I know Bauman has some more questions, but I wanted to lay that context down for you today because of what I see it now doing for us is going to help hopefully change transit across Canada because of the impact it can have on so many different groups of people creating value.
Thanks. So, Dan, you've been doing this for a while, right? This was not the first time you were looking at this policy when you and I started working on the cost benefit of this. Given that background, did the study actually add any sort of value? What was the value add from this? Was there anything that surprised you? Did it pull out anything that you didn't know? Was there any surprise in this process?
Well, I think that the beauty is we're looking at all these metrics, right? Like a lot of times funding flows down from, Ministry of Education, provincial outcomes for feds and maybe climate, right? Youth in general, there's lots of pockets of money at municipal, provincial, or federal levels. And for me to see things like we only have, don't quote me because it's all high schools, not just Limestone's high schools in the area, but like there might be like 10 high schools, 16,000 fewer absences. Like, how many assumptions do we have that, they just take the yellow bus? No, maybe that kid has to get their younger brother or sister to school to then try to make it to school. Maybe that kid feels embarrassed showing up late because they can't have another way. So that was one. I love now that we can show the offsetting of carbon, right? The normalization of multimodal youth, right? So these things, just to see the numbers, there are things I saw, but now I know. And we also, just FYI, this study was done very conservatively because it is fairly pioneering. And I think that the more data we create, we can find and refine even more numbers over time. But yeah, all the numbers you see there surprised me, truthfully, because I just had a lot of stories, but I didn't see the full picture,
And so that's great. But I think a question is, will this study itself have any impact? Like, can this actually influence decisions in your line of work? I know the study hasn't been out for too long, but will this impact any decisions?
I think so. Yeah, 100%. Like the way I look at it right now for transit systems, a lot of times across Canada, it's usually tied into municipalities, right? And so smaller, municipalities the size of Kingston, and other cities across Canada, like we're all feeling a pinch, right? The money has to be spent on things, right? But this study shows that if you put money here, you get benefit. Like what bank account would you like a 3.6 return on every dollar you put in, right? And so this is the type of stuff that I believe, coupled with the fact that it's helping the stories, the youth stories. I do fundamentally believe that this study alone, and hopefully other things that we can find from it and learn from it as we adapt and find more information and data in different communities. I do believe this will be the type of document that will give decision makers at a local level, provincial and federal, ways to invest in type of this intervention for youth. Because not only that, but it grows transit ridership. Like we've seen that over time, right? And so this is a perfect thing for a lot of Canadian cities that are experiencing, I believe, they call it the transit death spiral, right? You don't have enough money in, not enough money gets invested, routes get worse, people can't trust it, and that cycle is not a good thing, right? And so I believe this is a perfect way to hit, let's call it a multi-solving solution, and I believe this report will have will catalyze a national conversation. And if anyone's watching out there that wants to talk about this, please ping me because this stuff matters to me. So if you're watching it from a transit or youth point of view, let me know.
So just in case this was not clear, I think something that really um, was an important element to me was the fact that this was not just about making the transit system free, right? It wasn't just letting the youth use it for free. There was this because a lot of other cities might be looking at this, trying to implement the same thing, right? Um, will it be enough to just say kids can get on the bus for free? Will that do the trick, or you need something else on top?
Well, I would say so, like I said, I'm not from the future, but I am from the past. And like I've been working on this quite some time locally, but also nationally. And there's actually about 23 communities across Canada at the last time I counted, aggregating information on that Get on the Bus website through Small Change, that they're working on it their own way. And so I think these impact numbers really matter, and this type of thing matters because it gives the uniqueness of each community a bit more to work with, right? For example, Halifax right now, based upon all this work in Kingston, and I just shared with them this report actually, and they were very happy to see because those communities that are already working on it, it further justifies their leadership. To prioritize this, it gives them more to work with, and so yes, no, I believe in those 23 plus communities across Canada from Whistler, and not all of them are anything to do with me. So I don't want to take credit. Like it's a very open access movement. It's about trying to change and shift policy for a good investment for youth to grow transit for multiple reasons. And this did that. And so no, I do think it's this not the start, truthfully, because I've been working on this for quite some time. But this is the level of detail I think is needed to give decision makers something really to look at. It's a busy world out there. There's a lot of problems. This problem, or not this problem, this intervention, schools, work, time, money, carbon emissions, value, and so I'm excited to see where it goes next.
Thanks for that. So probably my final question here. Oh no, not my final question. I have another one actually after that. But when you look at studies like this, so there are many decisions, many policies being considered in different areas and sectors, and such as studies could inform them, could motivate them, help with advocacy, help with fine-tuning and designing, etc. What are some of the challenges that can limit such analysis, like impact analysis, and also the influence they can have in your area of work?
Well, I think sometimes, like there's some things are very political, right? Sometimes it's about the type of data, right? Sometimes there's other externalities that want certain systems to work certain ways, right? Some older maybe systems, and so I think that one thing that I believe is just the idea of that litmus test that this did, right? Like this is not about Dan, this is not about Kingston, this is about value, and so there's a lot that can, I think, be added into those challenges for us, like even trying to figure out what type of data sources, what other externalities we can bring into this to look for different value. So there's definitely those are challenges, but like I say, anywhere is the only way to eat an elephant or eat the moon is one bite at a time. So we started off with what we had and we headed into the direction. And I also think that we it was the curiosity of it, to try to figure it out together. And I know for you, working on the study, it was, I like that you didn't believe me. I think that's what this is about. I miss a time when discourse can be open and transparent, where we're looking for the common good of something, and so, sometimes I think it's ego too. What happens if an intervention doesn't work? What happens if maybe, but things are changing, the world's changing, and we have to, I think, be very real with as much as we can with each other, and try to support each other, right? And I think, I don't know if I went off a little bit there, but I do think it all ties into some of the potential, just different challenges. But yeah, like at the end of the day, it was, yeah, I don't know. It's, truthfully, I cried when I saw the numbers. Like imagine a decade of your life working towards something you couldn't really always quantify other than stories. Like when I was in Ottawa, really quick, I know we have questions coming in. I went to Ottawa at a conference. I literally went up to the front desk at this conference. I'm on a panel. A kid, his name's Sam. He looks up at me. He's getting my card. I'm sure you guys have been to get a little card, your name tag. And he says, "Are you from Kingston?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You taught me how to ride the bus." This is a decade later, and I met this child for 20 minutes. So I knew there was impact, but this study now gave me more to continue with this passion and work with others to treat, a bigger intervention and good value for Canadians, youth, and transit systems for our tax dollars and money, right? Resource.
That's very interesting. So what do you see going forward? This is my last question. What's in the future for like impact? When I say in the future, like I mean like what's the future of impact analysis in your area of work looking like?
Well, like this is fairly new, right? Like Kingston started this in 2012, right, as a community. Now communities across Canada are replicating it. I do believe that this study, there could be so many layers to it. Like I would really like to refine it more, right? Different communities. Halifax, for example, 30,000 youth in Halifax get a free bus pass, and it was based off of this work in Kingston. But they've done, they started later. I've been working with them and supporting as I can through the charity, and they now have interviewed 8,100 parents and youth, right? And so they have the ability to set things up a bit differently, right? And so, but the stats are amazing from a mental health and an independence point of view. Mid 80s youth saying it's giving them more independence. And I have a child who's 17. That means a lot, right? To get involved in the community. So I guess what I could see this doing is I want to get more impact analysis. Analysis, is that a word? I don't know. You guys I'm not the doctor here. But, I think that there's just more refined work to give more clarity of more value. And so I'm very excited that this is the platform of that work that I do believe across Canada in different ways. It could be pulled apart, looked at differently if it's set up. And I think we can really see some neat value. And I think a lot of impact analysis, if you set it up that way, can keep on cascading different types of value for different demographics or needs. But I'm very excited, as you can see. I've only had 2 coffees today. I see some questions coming in too, Bauman.
Excellent. Yeah, very, very fascinating. So I'll pass it to Glenn to manage the Q&A part. But thanks.
Yeah, and throw any questions you want as we're going through this. We've got a few questions in there. One of the questions, we talk a lot in the program, the CPIA program, about measuring, of course, empirical, evidence-based, data-driven measurement, so you can be confident and secure beyond this idea of good intentions. And everybody's got great and good intentions when it comes to impact, but actually the data that supports that. You put a bunch of data out there, Dan. And one of the elements within the program is learning how to tell a good story or tell the story around measuring impact, because you're trying to influence a crowd, people, influencers, stakeholders, what have you. How did you stand in front of the transit people and government and taxpayers, for that matter, and say 196,000 less rides, but really less income? So $500,000 if you two and a quarter each a trip, but the impact of that is going to be this, meaning we're going to get more than just simply the income. How do you stand in front of an audience like that with the confidence to do that?
Well, I can tell you the confidence I had is because the impact analysis was retroactive. So we worked through it over a decade, right? So I think there's a couple ways you can look at this, but the validation of this was also, there's economics behind it, right? Like the city already, how much money does any municipality pour into youth-based programs, right? What's the value of that? Getting kids to different things in the community, right? But I guess my point is, this wasn't set up in a way when I was using this analysis to try to create change. We had already made the change. This just further enhances and says, hey, like this change that we're doing and works is good, right? And so I think you can look at, that intervention of when and how to do an impact analysis, the resources you have, the data you have access to, and then of course the professionals that, I'm more of a storyteller than a numbers guy. In fact, I failed grade 12 math. I didn't tell Bauman that, but maybe Bauman, could you enter anything on your thoughts about just from your side of helping create this project? Mute there.
All right, you can hear me, right? Sorry, I was busy with the chat. I was trying to read some of the questions. Can you repeat the question, please?
Well, I just mean like in the case that what we did, I'm telling a story, but I've always told the story, right? That we saw as we built it, but the impact analysis was done retroactively, right? So I guess it was more about using as impact analysis. I mean, I've used it in my career. I see what the need is. For anyone watching, I see the beauty of setting up good systems and data collection and understanding if you want to get to it, or retroactively doing it. I guess as someone performs them, can you speak to that?
Yeah. So I often like to think of this using an example from a parallel setting. And that parallel setting that might resonate with most people here is financial analysis. When we think about financial analysis, whenever you're making a decision, a financial decision, you do some analysis to inform the decision. Then you make the decision, you monitor things. You hire accountants to track expenses, to file taxes. You might have auditors to come and see how things are going. So you plan, you monitor, you make decisions, all informed by different types of analysis. And that's financial impact. And with other forms of impact, you can do the exact same thing. You can look at what the past tells you about the impacts to expect, and then you can monitor and see if those expectations were realized. And that information can help you shut something down, expand it, scale it, course correct. All sorts of decisions can be informed by that. And oftentimes people are worried about like think that they might find something they don't like, but more than often it's like informing decisions about like what to scale up, how to scale up, how to do things better. So yeah, it's an ongoing process in my view, and you never stop questioning whether or not your assumptions are right, and continuous data collection and analysis can help just refine and improve.
And Dan, just a question for Mahona in the audience, and I welcome others as well. Did Kingston have to add more buses? Did they fill up the ones they had? Did they plan well for this kind of result?
Yeah, actually, so I definitely don't speak for the municipality, but being in Kingston for that long, working aside all this, I would say that between 2000, one thing is like if you look back and Google like Kingston Transit over, I think like 2012 to 19, they had such great planning processes as a whole. They had investment already going in, right? Express buses, employer pass programs. In fact, I remember the stats because I mean, this is what my brain does remember certain things, not how to do the numbers, but the numbers. In 2012, there were 3.5 million rides as a whole in Kingston. And by pre-COVID, about 2019, we were up to like 6.9 million rides. It was touted as one of the fastest growing transit systems. But please don't take that just as the youth. We had extremely good governance and a really dedicated and extremely good leader at Kingston Transit doing this work. And so I definitely don't take credit for that. To answer that, it was a bit of a, from what I know, transit systems often retool, rejig based on need, right? And so might have been the regular retooling and rejigging, but the investment in the transit system was already kind of there, right? And so I remember, and I respect him, he's now moved on so much, but he'd said, let him fill up. Let them fill up. Just means more people, more usage, more investment. You create that positive reinforcement cycle for transit investment, in which we had for that decade as we grew to one of the fastest growing in Canada. So I can't pull that as a part, but I don't think there was no dedicated buses like saying, hey, this school route or that. It was more as they rejigged and worked on the whole system. It kind of worked because they already had such a progressive and positive plan, very well documented, really good business plans.
Can I comment on that?
If you want.
So I think this question, I forgot who asked the question, but this question actually points a little bit towards an important thing. You have that slide, Dan, that talks about all these impacts, all these benefits, but it costs something too, right? And I think this question talks about like, what is the cost of doing this, and is it a justified investment? If you're thinking of this policy as an investment, like all those impacts are great, like these many tons of CO2 saved, these many car trips, etc. But at what cost? And I think that's a very valid question, which was a part of the study. It's not in this slide, but like these, we as a part of the study, we put dollar values in these and then compare it with the cost. As Dan mentioned, a lot of the cost was already happening, but we still try to figure out what's the cost of having one more passenger in the bus. And as Dan highlighted in one of the earlier slides, at the peak, it was like 10% of the passengers, of the total passengers, were youth that were joining this through the program. So it wasn't on a marginal basis, it wasn't like that significant of a jump, but it's still like if you think about like the timing of the demand, like kids go to school in the morning and leave, like the timing might be at peak hours demand. So you might see some increased demand for maybe adding new buses to routes, etc., or expanding the route. So we did compare the costs and the benefits all in monetary terms, and the benefits when monetized exceeded that sort of increased cost, which was Which was another sort of argument that if you want to advocate for change, you need that piece too. It's not enough just to show how many tons of CO2 or how many trips. You have to make them comparable with the cost of the intervention as well, which is a
When I
part
think
of impact analysis.
just one other small thing, I think, as we're talking about the dollar value too, is like it seems like we always see big news stuff, from the federal level, the provincial level. But for me, like this matters a lot too, because these are the taxpayers, your property tax. This is my kid,
Yeah.
on the bus locally, right? Like, so the extension to the taxpayer is also the extension to that localness of all this. These are our kids in our community, our schools, right? And so there's that extension, I think, that ripples through a community in this case too. But it's important because what I've realized through COVID is it seems like, different levels of government and understanding of responsibilities somewhat convoluted sometimes. But this one right here, it's, we might be pulling stats from a provincial level regarding education. But at the end of the day, the day-to-day, like I'll have a lunch with somebody. I remember the other day, it wasn't like not even making this up. I think it was like 3 weeks ago. He's like, my grade 8, if she didn't do this, she couldn't get to dance class every day because I can't leave work, right? It's these real conversations by real people in the communities that see the extension of the value to not just the youth, but the community, right?
And again, feel free to throw in any questions. And that I mentioned this idea of more than good intentions. That seems to, because everybody in their gut feels this is a great idea. Yeah, free passes for kids on the bus, let them ride all these things. But until you put measures beside it, and the book itself, More Than Good Intentions by Dean Carlin and Jacob Appel, it really brings home this idea of no, you've got to put empirical measure to this because you're trying to sway people in some way or validate or make them feel good about where their tax money's going. I live in Kingston. I pay taxes. I support this. Now, would I support it as a notion? Probably. Do I feel much better because there's data behind it? Yeah. And that to me is that to me is the leap that a program like this really helps to make clear is this idea of more than good intentions. I'm a marketer. You talked about how best 3 years of your life were grade 11. Well, for me, I'm a marketer and I like to tell stories. And this idea of more than good intentions and having the data behind it, the numbers will set you free. So to me, this is a validation of this kind of program for sure. One of the questions we got was just, around the data. You talked about doing this in post, Dan. You did this after it was already, in play. Would you have done anything differently as you sort of look at the data points and now knowing more, or Bob, and I'll ask you for that as well. Would you have put in any additional measures or, in some way to substantiate or validate this kind of effort?
Yeah, so actually a quick question just before, because I see it's a children grade 9 year. No, it continues through high school. So it's grade 9, 10, 11, and 12 now. So just I saw that question there. Yeah, Glenn, I mean, like everything, whatever they say, hindsight's, I don't know, 50-50, is it? I'm just joking. But my point is, I mean, definitely like between institutions, like I love that Halifax is collecting data. I love that they're collecting emails to survey, more qualitative, quantitative pieces that could factor into this. I think anytime cross institution, public institution, making sure you understand where the data is getting collected, what type of data might be useful. Like, I think these are the things that, again, we were busy not knowing what we were doing, setting it up to create something that was good, and we refined it. I would say that through the process of setting up a program like this, the beauty was there was between institutions a great relationship of people working to try to figure it out what works best for the ebb and flow of both needed institutions. But as for data, I think the more, depending on intervention, depending on industry or sector, or whatever you're working on, I think the one thing, if we knew it was going to do this, I think, yeah, setting it up a bit where you're gathering more information the right ways, because I still think that there's more benefit than maybe we've uncovered, or there's more to work off of for different demographics or certain types of students or needs or whatever. So, yeah, just really making sure you're looking for where that is and setting up a good way to find it, I think would be something that would be good. But Bauman, I mean, I remember I failed grade 12 math, so I'll let you tell me more about numbers.
So I actually see quite a number of questions on like how did we go about doing this, and there is also a question about whether or not there was a government subsidy in place. I kind of speak to how we went about doing this. Basically, it comes down to two basic fundamental questions. One is like, if we have an intervention which includes like letting the kids get on the bus for free and train them on using the bus, this is sort of the package of intervention. Will this actually change? Because all we observe is the number of kids that get on the bus. That's what we observe. We don't necessarily see what would be the scenario without this sort of this intervention in place. So one big question, one fundamental question is like, how many of these kids are on the bus now because of this program? Because some of them would have paid to get on the bus anyway, right? So that's one fundamental question. The other fundamental question is getting on the bus better than getting a ride with your parents or using a bike? And this is how we designed the study. And I believe you have the link to the study, or Glenn will share it. And you can see all the nuances and details that went behind it. But the bottom line is we took a very conservative approach to use the existing data from the city on utilization of bus by eligible sort of youth. And we basically calculated what is the minimum sort of conservative measure we can consider as number of rights that are associated that are there because of the program. So that gave us that established the basis for how many rights are because of the program. And then separately, we calculated what are the different types of benefits or impact as you transition from walking, taking a ride with parents, or using a bicycle, etc., to taking the bus. For which we had to like quantify also using existing measures on like what will happen, like where do people actually come from when they switch from one mode of transportation to taking the bus. So all of those basically culminated in what you see, and all the assumptions are transparently documented in the report. So that's how we went about the statistics used from the city, from other sources. There's this very comprehensive study on the cost side of different modes of transportation done in Montreal by HSA that really helped us with some of the basic assumptions. But those different sources were used. I might have gone a little off track from your question, Dan, but I wanted to sort of make sure I address some of the questions.
Yeah, no problem. I see a couple more I can quickly answer too. I'm just trying to. One is around trying to impact. What was the difference the impact analysis made when you're trying to preach or implement the program? This program was finalized in 2012 or no 2022. So it took a decade, but the city of Kingston, the local school boards, made it permanent. So this study actually happened after the permanency. So that's one note. And then also I see. Yeah, no, I think those were some of the questions I saw there. Yeah, I think that's important because, again, this is now more about how do we share knowledge in this ever-changing world, too. I see the beauty of this is like, imagine all these beautiful interventions. Like, I always think that the world has all the solutions because they're happening all over the place, and if stuff like this can line it up and help each other make good interventions depending on issues around, each community, but learn from each other. Halifax isn't the same as Kingston. It's bigger, right? But, and it's not the same as Whistler or Victoria or Regina that are working in different spaces like doing this. And they're not related because of Kingston's did this, but they're all doing an intervention that's similar. And the more we can share and adapt, I think this type of stuff can help, yeah, I think that's what I had there.
There was a question about whether or not there was a subsidy in place.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I guess like a subsidy, like the city of Kingston offset some costs. The school boards locally, public and Catholic school boards chip in. So it's a joint kind of initiative. I guess it's more of like the word subsidy for me. It's, how much do we subsidize, our roads being built? You know what I mean? So it's public dollars for sure. But the outcomes have come with that I think we see. The other thing, little things like, the indirectness of getting kids to work, right? Or, you know what I mean? Like all these spillover benefits, I think is that. So, but yes, how the program's paid for is that. Now, I will say one other little unique thing in transit is because there's more taps now by youth, and because they're paid taps by the city, the municipality, and the school boards chipping in, it actually garners more dollars back from the Ontario government in the way of how they pay for transit systems too. So there was an uptick in that. So that helped offset some of the program cost. Yeah. So I would say, as for subsidy, I would say it's publicly funded. Yes.
Maybe one thing I would add there, because this was a very interesting part of the story for me, the subsidy story. With a lot of different types of public investment, the majority of the cost is sunk. So if a bus is going from A to B and you see empty seats in that bus, adding a person to that seat is not going to cost anyone anything because the bus is already taking that route, and that person is not going to be a significant weight on that bus, and not is not going to increase the fuel consumption of the bus, right? So everything would be very, very small in the margin. Actually, when I see a bus going with an empty seat, it's kind of like seeing a wind turbine that is not turning. It's like the cost is done. It's just not producing the ride or the electricity, right? So the concept of subsidy in this case is a bit of a nuance that could be a tricky point of the process, because when a kid gets on the bus, you think about its foregone revenue, but then the question is, would that kid actually be on the bus if this wasn't free? And now that the kid is in the bus, is it actually costing us more? So there are a lot of questions there that become nuances that must be in place whenever politicians are trying to implement policies like this, to be mindful of, like, who are the actors, what are the cost structures, what are the incentives in front of them when designing such policies.
But I think one thing to add in quick, Bob, and it's just we're on political 4-year cycles, you know what I mean? And so people need wins and stuff. But at the end of the day, and Glenn, I know you as a marketer, I look at this as one of the biggest behavioral interventions around marketing. Of, you have whole normalized groups of youth. Now, and this means a lot to me because there's a study I saw in England where it was like the roaming of youth, right? And we see such a high side of youth mental just mental wellness. Like I look at my own daughter, the autonomy she has to move around with her friends warms my heart, right? Truthfully, because at the end of the day, what I've seen too over stats with Kingston is there is now I don't want to confuse this. I'm going to call it a young adult, but basically after high school, there's a pass that's slightly cheaper per month called a youth pass up to 24, which actually is quite beautiful because it shows that after these programs work, you are creating future riders, right? You're people that are paying for the system, people that empathize with the system, people that will care about the fact that transit was a part of their lives. So therefore they might vote for that as well, right? And so I think that my one friend said to me, he said, you don't really understand what you talk about. They don't always want to talk to me about buses, I can tell you that much. But he said, this is a generational program. Like it takes time, right? Yeah, sorry, I kind of lost my thought there, but I think that's important too. Just the whole, what is the long-term benefit too? And this is tied into this as well.
And I should also note that one of the ways this study was conservative was that we actually didn't quantify or monetize any long-term benefits. So that behavioral change aspect, we didn't make any assumptions about how these individuals behave 10 years down the road and how their families might behave 10 years down the road now that they are bus riders. So those were intentionally excluded to be more conservative because there are lesser studies about like the long-term benefits. But 10 years from now, you can definitely do a study to track those who were impacted by the bus program in Kingston and see how they behave compared to those who were not in that program.
Absolutely. I'm going to put up my email, and I know there's still a few questions. That's wonderful. And everybody's going to get this in after the fact in terms of the video component of it. And feel free to send me any questions you've got. Ahona, I know you've got quite a few, and I love that. But again, really want to thank, again, respectful of everybody's time out there. We said half hour, we've leaked into 45 minutes, 50 minutes. Really appreciate everybody's time today. I know it's a busy schedule out there. And Dan, tremendous, as really appreciated, and Bauman as always. Lots of questions around the program itself. I'd love to answer those. And we welcome a new cohort in January 12th. And I'd love to tell you more about that, and I can share information, the process, the results, the certification, all of that. But I want to take a minute to say thank you to Bauman, and of course, thank you to Dan. Really appreciate that. And thank you to everybody for attending today. All the best, and we'll see you soon. And Jason in the background, thank you as well. Take care.
Thank you.